and welcome back to the MPL Weekly. I'm Becca Scott, and I'm here with Marshall Sutcliffe and one of our very own MPL players, Eric Froelich.
Hi.
Hi. So glad you're here. This is so exciting because this is the week that we figure out who in each division is taking home that, well, not exactly anything to take home yet, but is...
who gets to stay at home
Who gets to
with
stay at home
knowledge.
for day one of the Arena Mythic Championship coming up in a couple weeks. So we're heading into our Emerald division. And we're already on to our third division. It's just flying by.
We're cruising.
We're seeing each decider match in each of the different divisions. And this next one, as you on our break screen, we're looking, we've got Manfield and Juza coming up. And both of these players have, we can see in the standings, have 5-1 records, but you do see Brad's name in bold there with the orange lettering because he is the only undefeated player in the Spark Split.
Yeah, every other division, we've seen people at 5-1 who needed to win to lock it up, make sure there's no tiebreaker. And this one, being 5-1 is worth so little. And honestly, that's a big thanks to Matt Nass and Christian Hawk, who have really been team players. They haven't played each other yet, but they've made sure every single person to stop by in their arena matches, like you can have a win, you can have a win. They just Oprah'd it out there. You get a win, you get a win. And so
Truly generous players.
we've seen, I mean, but at the end of the day, like Brad, Martin, and Seth have beaten everyone else.
They
like,
have been
I mean,
crushing, yeah.
Martin and Seth have obviously lost to Brad. That's why he's 6-0. But they haven't played each other yet. They're both 5-1. They've taken everyone else in the division and been like, we've got this. Maybe we can't beat Brad, but we hope someone else can because they've killed it, and they still don't control their own destiny.
Yeah, well, we will see Brad's final match a little bit later, but right now let's go to Martin and Juza's head-to-head screen here. You can see they haven't been playing quite as long as a lot of players, just, you know, barely going on 20 years here.
Yeah.
And a lot of top finishes for each of them.
When they started, they could still vote if they were born in that year, so I think they're doing pretty good.
Yeah, both Hall of Famers as well, and just, you know, extremely well-known players.
Yeah, two of the best players in the world, no big deal, both at 5-1, and just, man, this is a tough matchup.
Yeah, Seth has brought the mono red every week, and Juza is bringing Jeskai Walkers. So let's take a look at that. Let me know what's interesting here.
There's a lot interesting here. This deck is sweet.
So this deck, you know, the blue-white Planeswalker deck is a deck that emerged. I think that Zach Elsick was one of the big innovators behind that deck, as well as several others. And John Rolfe of the MPL is actually the one who took it more in the Jeskai direction. And then there's a bunch of iterations since then, and the deck has definitely evolved around there. But a lot of the 3-mana Planeswalkers around Interplanar Beacon to gain a bunch of life, make it easier to cast all these spells. And then to, of course, Sarkhan the Master List, that's where, you know, your end game is. It can create a dragon, turn all your Planeswalkers into dragons. It's just an awesome Magic card. And so I think Martin kind of realized a lot of people are playing mono red, and not only does he have a deck that has a pretty good matchup with a lot of cheap cards in main deck and a lot of, you know, very powerful effects against mono red in the main deck. Look at his sideboard. He's got more copies of Deafening Clarion and 3 Lyra Dawnbringers. So certainly prepared for exactly this matchup, and I think this is something you wanted to see.
By the way, I'm going to speak for our audience here. We're deeply offended that you did not mention Fibbles of the Lost.
Flop-a-lot.
We'll let it slide.
3 copies of Flop-a-lot.
A crowd favorite, because no one knows quite how to pronounce a word with no vowels. And Seth Manfield with the mono red aggro. We've seen it before.
The exact same 60 cards as William Jensen. The same deck we've seen Seth play a number of times as well. He doesn't have a ton of answers to the Planeswalkers. He's just got to be attacking them and burning them. And there's a lot of Planeswalkers that don't make that particularly easy for you. So this should be a great matchup between two of the best in the world.
Whew, I'm excited to see. Yeah, the red does matter a lot, whether or not you can get the Experimental Frenzy out when you want it to. And I'm excited to see something that can go up against it really well and really devised to combat the mono red aggro deck.
Yeah, I mean, Juza's got a bunch of copies of Teferis and plenty of other cards that can actually deal with an Experimental Frenzy once it's resolved. And so, and then he's got 3 copies of Ixalan's Binding in his main deck. It's one of the best answers to Experimental Frenzy. They play Frenzy, you play Binding, Frenzy's gone, and you can't play another one.
Oh.
So that's
and they
huge.
Can't deal with the binding.
And they can't remove the Binding, yeah.
So it's just that locks
absolutely massive. Deafening Clarion also, just a huge card in this matchup. So he's got a lot of the answers. He's got 3 colors of mana. He's, you know, might be on the back foot. The red deck can get ahead, and you can't always catch up. So that's how you win. But the Jeskai Walker deck definitely has the late game.
Well, let's see what happens here in this game with Seth Manfield and Martin Juza.
All right, let's get underway here. We're going to be sitting with Seth Manfield, and he's got Viashino Pyromancer, Goblin Chain Whirler, and light up the stage with 4 mountains. Fine.
Yeah, totally fine.
Okay.
Goblin Chain Whirler definitely not at its best in this matchup, although still actually quite good. The creatures in this deck are just Flobbelops, as we know, which of course Chain Whirler will just deal with. But actually, just dealing
It's
a point.
Fibblethip.
You say tomato, I say tomato. But these Planeswalkers, a lot of them, you kind of finish them off when they get to 1 loyalty. A lot of them go down to 1, and just a 1 point of damage, changes things pretty dramatically. When you look at Teferi and Narset Kazmina, all of these Planeswalkers are definitely losing some of their value if they take a point.
Thoughts on mulligan into 4? Not an option, apparently. It looks like
this is a bad 5-2. He's only got 1 land. He's got 2 copies of a legendary permanent, and
he had to put a land on the bottom of his library as well. Ooh, Interplanar Beacon.
Yeah, there's
At least
there's
it's a
actually
land.
less blue sources than you might think. That we've seen a lot of Esper decks which just have 16 to 18 sources of each color, and Interplanar Beacon makes it a little bit harder to cast your actual colored spells that aren't Planeswalkers.
Pair of Light Up the Stage in hand now for Seth Manfield means that he's going to be able to fuel the fire going forward. Deafening Clarion, though, the draw step for Juza does give him the potential to clean up a well-built-out board going forward.
He's got to find it here, though.
Now he needs it. Does it? Oh, one of his worst draws possible. Sarkhan the Masterless, a second copy in his hand. He can't cast it for days, and that might have just sealed the deal right there because he's taking minimum 5 damage here this turn, and a pair of Light Up the Stages could add to that significantly as well.
I think people would point out here that Juza put the red-white land to the bottom of his deck, and if he had that on top, he would have been able to cast Clarion. I think the thing that a lot of people are missing there, and why his play makes a lot of sense, is that even if he were able to cast the Clarion this turn and then drew the Sarkhan the next turn, which, the order of the deck's obviously not going to change, that's what would have happened. He still wouldn't be progressing his board, and so Seth would still be able to cast these Light Up the Stages. They would have cost, full cost. It would have been a little bit slower. Obviously, Martin would have much preferred to have the land in hand to be able to cast that spell, but it really wasn't progressing his game plan the way that you might think, and casting Clarion would not have necessarily done everything you needed it to do. So.
Okay. Well, that one didn't work out for him as very well at all. He ended up drawing a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and then pressing that concede button. So game number 1, in convincing fashion, goes to Seth Manfield. Of course, one of the maybe hidden benefits that you get from playing a deck like the one that Manfield is playing is twofold. On one hand, only needing basic lands means that you're much more likely to deploy your game plan, whatever it happens to be. And the other one is that you do punish your opponent when they stumble on their mana. And there's a lot of mana bases in Standard right now that are 3 colors full on with, 15 to 20 dual lands, and some of them are tapped in some circumstances. And you do pick up a win here and there just by simply curving out. I mean, that draw from Manfield was not exceptional, right?
No.
It was 2-drop, 3-drop, and a couple of Light Up the Stages.
It was
and the
good.
job was done. Yeah,
exceptional.
yeah. So he picks the win up there, and we're going to go into game number 2 between these two great players.
So Seth is going to have a lot less reach in this game. He's boarded out 8 of his burn spells and trying to have more, sticky permanents, things that are going to impact the game a little bit more. Legion War Boss and Tybalt, so he's got a lot of 3s in his deck. Or have a Vulcan in. The Tybalt, it's not great. Making Devils is not great. Turning off life gain, however, can be huge. When your opponent has Deafening Clarions and Interplanar Beacons, stopping them from gaining their extra life is definitely valuable. There's also 3 copies of Lyra Dawnbringer in Juza's sideboard, so stopping that from gaining life is nice. Of course, it can kill Tybalt pretty quickly, but we also saw Seth bring in multiple copies of Fight with Fire. This is a card that not many red decks have had access to recently, and that's probably changing pretty dramatically because killing Lyra Dawnbringer is a must.
And as we saw, if the game does happen to go very long, William Huey Jensen with the back-to-back Fight with Fires to just win the game.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound like something that's very likely to happen, but it happens. It happens once. It's worth a ton. 9 lands is a lot of lands to ask for. It's not really your A plan, but it is definitely something available to.
Once again, we see a player exercise a bit of patience when it comes to Light Up the Stage. Seth gets in for 1 with the Lava Runner, and it just plays his land and passes, and there's a Runaway Steam Can off the top of the library. He's also got Goblin Chain Whirler in hand. Yeah. So far, though, just 3 tap lands in a row for Juza as he's trying to get Seth to play something into this Deafening Clarion, I'm assuming.
Of course. And Martin is one of the most patient players in the world. I think it's one of his biggest strengths, is that he's able to he's not worried. He knows that this damage is just not relevant. 1 point here, 1 point there, just not a thing. And he wants the Deafening Clarion to get value. He also knows that he's got Ixalan's Binding in his hand. So when Seth taps out to cast Experimental Frenzy, he just gets punished.
This is really interesting now because Juza perhaps needs to just fire off this Deafening Clarion, but he sees the Goblin Chain Whirler exiled from the light up the stage, so he knows that he won't be able to get that one.
Yeah, but the second copy of Ixalan's Binding means it's not even a sweat for him to use a Binding on the Chain Whirler if he so needs to. And he's got Lightning Strike as well, so he's got multiple very clean, excellent avenues of dealing with this Chain Whirler.
Yeah, that Binding off the top looks nice, especially in conjunction with the one he's already got. You got to feel like Martin is tempted to keep one of them in hand for Experimental Frenzy specifically, but the second one...
Right. The question then just becomes how much respect you want to play something like Chandra, allowing that to potentially resolve. Now, the fact is that Chandra can be killed with damage, and so drawing the Sarkhan does make it a little bit more, I guess, easy on you using an Ixalan's Binding, as you have another potential answer for that Planeswalker.
Yeah.
You do want to save that answer for Experimental Frenzy, as you noted, though.
Right, but you mentioned the damage, and look at the rest of Yuza's hand. Kasmina makes 2/2s that can attack a Planeswalker. Lightning Strike is direct damage at a Planeswalker, and you mentioned Sarkhan. So
right, the fact that he has the Lightning Strike in hand, a clean answer for Chain Whirler, save those bindings. They're more powerful, and well, Seth still has 6 cards in hand, so you can expect some real things to still be coming down.
Here's Tibalt, Rakish Instigator now. But that's all he's going to play. So, Seth has been really patient and just simply deploying 1 or at most 2 threats on the battlefield at any given time. And so far,
seems like a great Sarkhan turn. Like, the thing that you want to do with Sarkhan is it's great to be able to play it and make a dragon on a turn where your opponent can't just very easily kill Sarkhan. The one tough thing about Sarkhan against a red deck is that they do have a lot of burn spells, so taking Sarkhan down to 2 can be a bit of a problem. The thing is, Martin knows that Seth is not going to have very many of those burn spells in this deck, and it turns out that he has 3 Wizard's Lightning.
Because we're
all the Lightning Strikes and the Shocks are gone.
Sideboard here.
Exactly.
Okay, right.
And you still get to leave a 4/4 flyer behind as well. So you're getting a lot of value. If they're able to trade 1 for 1 and kill the Sarkhan, you still have a dragon. That's a reasonable exchange. Obviously, you'd prefer to have it all, have the dragon and have Sarkhan live, and we're not far from that being the case. Now, the Chain Whirler changes that. The Chain Whirler actually hits the Sarkhan, and now the Devil can attack it, where even if it gets blocked, it still deals 1 damage and will be able to take down the Sarkhan.
Oh, yeah. So Chain Whirler, again, just finding little avenues to get value in conjunction. Yeah, it's just great. I mean, even the times when you think it's not really, it's not killing a creature, it's not killing a Planeswalker, it's still affecting the board in a meaningful way.
It does do that quite, like, in my time playing the Jeskai Planeswalkers deck, I found the Chain Whirler to be quite annoying just because there are so many Planeswalkers that you really don't want it to take that 1 extra damage.
Yeah, you see that, of course, with the 2 Planeswalkers left in hand as well for Martin Juza. These are, uncommon Planeswalkers that start off with 5 loyalty and -2. Once they do that twice, they're left with 1 loyalty left, and Chain Whirler's more than happy to clean up the mess there. The more the messier, says Tibalt, as he puts another Devil onto the battlefield. But as you mentioned before, Sarkhan, bye-bye. And that was probably one of the best ways that Seth could actually answer it. It didn't cost him a full card in any...
No, it didn't even really cost him close to a full card.
Right. Narset Parter of Veil's going to hit the battlefield now, though, for Juza, immediately minus, and he finds, hey, look at that, Sarkhan's back in business. And the question is, does he want to play Hollowed Fountain or keep it in his hand to use with Kasmina? And he's going to play it. Because right now, his hand is pretty stacked, but you do get to, of course, loot when you make a wizard with Kasmina, but you get to see the card first. Fight with Fire.
Yeah, he is getting pretty close to 9 mana here, but of course it is exiled off a light at the stage. He doesn't have the option to wait, and of course a great answer to the dragon.
This turn looks pretty good for Seth as well, though. He's got the Legion War Boss at the ready, or he could finally take a turn to play Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, it'd be really good for Martin if Seth ends up with the Experimental Frenzy, because he's going to take a little bit less damage this turn and kind of have some time to set up. But he's a little bit behind the 8 ball. He's going to need to find one of his big haymakers, and that's probably Deafening Clarion or Lyra Dog.
Okay, it looks like Seth is going to go for the Legion War Boss, and that will allow him to apply pressure to Narset, or he could even send one at Martin if he doesn't care about Narset.
Yeah, I mean,
And he's just going to use the Chain Whirler to take down Narset. It makes sense. She represents a card.
Right,
A drawn card.
Right, you really don't want your opponent to just find a Clarion for free. That would not make you feel good.
Oof. Yeah, I don't even want to think about that. Interplanar Beacon's the draw step here for Juza. And interestingly, while you'd think a land at this point might not be super high value, well, he does have 2 Planeswalkers in his hand.
Yeah, gaining extra life is certainly a
matters.
valuable tool against a red deck, and I think this might be a turn where he might just play Sarkhan and minus it, just in hope that the Dragon's good enough, because 4/4 is quite good on this board. Of course, the Sarkhan static ability of just dealing a point of damage to creatures when they attack has a little bit of relevance here as well. Assuming the Dragon gets to stay in play.
That's right. You
Nope,
do
he's
need
gonna
to
go
keep
with
the
the binding.
Dragon. Yeah. So it looks like he's worried about the Legion Warbask kind of running away with this game. But casting Binding this turn is going to cost him a lot of damage, at least 5 as the board sits, and it could be more, as there's Experimental Frenzy now for Seth Manfield. He hits a land off of it. Of course, it's a mountain. It's the only lands he plays. And a Wizard's Lightning is the next card up.
So this is actually
that's a full price Wizard's Lightning.
So Seth is as good a player as there's ever been in Magic. And what you would see from any player who is not extremely experienced is immediately casting that Wizard's Lightning. Seth is not casting the Wizard's Lightning now because he can cast at instant speed, and he wants to play around Ixalan's Binding. He knows that he's got another Frenzy in hand, and the only real answer to this Frenzy is going to be Ixalan's Binding. If Ixalan's Binding resolves, he will not be able to cast the other Frenzy. If he leaves up the 4 mana, he can respond to the Binding, targeting the Frenzy by sacrificing the Frenzy. So he doesn't get to cast the Wizard's Lightning right away, but he will get to cast another Experimental Frenzy next turn. It's an unbelievably advanced play.
He is so good. It's just ridiculous.
He just doesn't miss things.
He has been doing this the whole time. Last week, Paul Rietzel was here with us in the expert seat, and he was blown away by his play as well, pointing out multiple things in the similar way that you just did, Eric. I mean, Manfield has the respect of the pro community. There is no doubt about that. Wow, super smart. And it worked out well for him. He did sacrifice the Frenzy. Now he gets to draw that Wizard's Lightning, but he can simply replay the Frenzy. It looks like he's considering just using the Wizard's Lightning, though it will cost him extra mana if he's going to kill this wizard. It costs 5 thanks to Kasmina's static ability. But it does clear the way for 2 damage to Martin and Kasmina off the battlefield. And this one looks like it's starting to really fall apart here for Juza. He's nearly out of gas. A lot riding on that Sarkhan, but Experimental Frenzy across the way says it could be really bad for him.
Yeah, Frenzy. I mean,
you know how it goes from here, right?
He's used multiple bindings. They're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, Seth doesn't have that many lands left in his deck. Now, the thing is, I mean, there's still 10 lands in his deck, but he's got to hit 2 of them to be stopped completely, and that means he also can't be finding light at the stages and similar off them. And he already has so much mana in play that he can just keep casting the spells he finds. Interesting decision to not play the War Boss.
Yeah, why didn't he play it? He just figured the thing was going to die anyway?
Like, the thing dies anyway, but being able to go a couple cards deeper off this Frenzy could be worth a lot. It's definitely an interesting decision.
Okay, so Sarkhan dies, but the dragon stays on the battlefield to live to block another day.
So he just didn't cast it here.
Wait, what happened? He didn't cast the War Boss?
I don't know.
I mean, is there a chance he would prefer to have it in his hand even with an Experimental Frenzy on it? That seems unlikely, right? It's
that's
free.
the only thing I can think of. I mean, having this in your hand in case they're able to deal with the Frenzy, but...
And look at this play now from Juza. He plays Teferi Time Raveler and returns Ixalan's Binding to his hand, so now he can fire that off again on Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, he's going to get to sacrifice it again, but there isn't another one in his hand this time.
Right. It would keep it as an option as a top deck down the line. He has 3 in his main deck and 1 in his board, so likely has 2 more left. And he's going to draw Legion Warboss for the turn. Now, he did have enough mana, right, to sack it and play the Warboss.
He didn't play a spell. He had all 9.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is that he brought it in his hand rather than on the battlefield should something, die, should the frenzy die, but I'm not sure why you'd want to do that.
Right. Also, because choosing to not cast a spell on top of your library potentially
Exactly.
locks out further spells.
Right. There were spells he could have found that, like, let's just say the next card down is Fight with Fire. He could have killed that dragon and killed the Sarkin and dealt more damage last turn, and the War Boss would have been making tokens that were getting through.
Yeah, every turn you get with an experimental frenzy, of course, can represent.
I feel like I must be missing something. Like, what is the downside to having the War Boss
is there
in
one
play?
under a binding? Is that what's under the other binding?
It's so obvious. Of course there is.
I did it.
Oh, this is not the first time this has happened to me,
I
but I still
get
feel
a buy
equally
into
dumb
day
as
2 of
last
the Mythic
time.
Championship, or what happens now?
Oh my god.
I'm so
Yeah.
smart. A little slow, but so smart.
It's just unbelievable. This is not the first time this exact thing has happened to me.
Yeah, this standard format's actually fairly rough to commentate.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
got
yeah.
a lot of static abilities. Usually we look at the planeswalkers for those.
I appreciate you trying to make me feel less stupid, but it's not working. Okay. So
Love you, buddy.
that's the only reason I could think that you would not. It should be pretty obvious that, like, okay, there's no possible reason you wouldn't want to be casting this spell. Oh, you can't.
Yeah. And by the way, Seth, if you're watching at home, you can pick up your mouse and keyboard that you just flung across the room at us and go ahead and set those back on your desk. We got there.
There's a reason both of these players are 5-1 and I'm not.
So where does this game go now? Because Sarkhan has come back down and produced another dragon, and this is really hindering the attacks now from Seth.
Right? I mean, the fact that this War Boss is shut off has actually been completely huge.
Yes.
Was Martin just going for it? Interesting. Well, Martin's just saying, I'm going to kill you. You're dead next turn.
It does look
And there
like
aren't
that's
really outs to
exactly
it.
the case, right? How is he going to deal with 3 different 4-powered flying attackers? No way.
Yeah, there's just no way to do that.
Wow.
I mean, he can kill the Sarkin.
I am super impressed by Martin there, because it looked like that one was starting to really slip away from him, and he just sort of patiently hung in there, and then it was like, oh, I guess I'll just hit you for 8, hit you for 12, kill you.
So the play that we're trying to figure out is exactly what, really just messed Seth up. He hit the card on top of his library that he couldn't cast.
Right.
Which there was nothing else. Everything else was just burn spells and creatures. He didn't have that many lands left in his deck. He's like, well, hope I don't hit 2 lands in a row, and then hit the Legion War Boss is just the one spell. The only thing he couldn't cast. But he only had 2 more copies in his deck. So really unfortunate there. And Martin just played as tight as can be. The Teferi play, minusing it to return the Ixalan's Binding. Like, it didn't exile the Experimental Frenzy, but it killed it, and that was what he needed. That was the window he needed, and found the spells to get back in the game, and Sarkins can take over. If you can't kill a Sarkin immediately, I mean, even if you can, it's a 4/4 flyer that gains some life for 5 mana, that's pretty good, too.
That's insane that he hit the War Boss, too. Because you imagine being Juza and being like, come on, just double land one time, and instead of getting any lands at all, it's just go. You have to be so thrilled with that.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so that, of course, is going to force a Game 3 decider between Martin Juza and Seth Manfield.
Interestingly enough, again, we've mentioned this before, but the winner of this still needs to sweat Brad losing and losing 2 games to 0.
Yes. So this is these players fighting for the slim chance to stay in contention here in the Emerald Division. But, well, as we said before, when you're sitting in one of these players' seats, you just got to sit down and battle. There's really not much you can do.
Right.
Clean opener here, 1, 2, 3 for Seth Manfield. Starts off with Fanatical Firebrand, gets that thing into the red zone before passing the turn back to Juza, who's going to play a Steam Vents tapped. Now we're going to see Viashino Pyromancer attack for another 1. And Martin Juza's life total is going to fall down pretty quickly here.
Yeah, I mean, for Martin's sake, he has to kind of hope he doesn't play the Flobalop this turn, because there's a Chain Whirler just sitting there, and that's going to be cast pretty likely no matter what. I guess Martin can be hoping to find a Deafening Clarion, though, and really...
There he is! Fibblethip the Lost hits the battlefield. Lost no longer.
Well, he's going to be lost pretty soon.
Oh, no. Oh, Fibblethip, what are you doing? Are you lost? Well, send him home right back to the old graveyard there. Another 3 damage hits the red zone, and Martin Juza is already down to 12 here on turn number 3. So this one is very quick start here compared to the last game from Manfield.
So his decision here is basically playing Shock and a tap land. I think the more likely thing he's going to do here is play Narset and hope to find Deafening Clarion.
That does
Might
seem
not
to be
be
the
enough.
plan. Let's see if he can find it here. This is the first step for Martin Juza to try to make a comeback, is to get some card advantage by sweeping everything away, and no, Teferi Time Raveler.
Yeah, I mean, a fine card and can use, like, with a Interplanar Beacon and play, gain a life, bounce a creature. You'd think that gains life, but not really against these creatures. Firebrand, Haste, Pyromancer is going to deal 2 anyway, Chain Whirler. You get to save a little bit of damage, but it just comes back down and takes out the Teferi, just from entering the battlefield, and deals 1 still. Not a great place to be.
Chandra Fire Artisan from Seth Manfield is going to plus, of course, nothing much to do with that.
The only decision here for Seth is whether he attacks Narset for 2 or for 3. Leaving it in play at 1 is not necessarily a terrible thing. You don't really have ways to draw extra cards. You might want to deal the extra damage to your opponent. The downside to that, especially against this deck, is that Sarkhan the Masterless exists. So leaving a Planeswalker in play is a potential threat, although under most circumstances it's not really a big deal.
Yeah, also Seth is at 20. Can take a hit. But you know what, Eric? He actually rethought his process there and did exactly what you mentioned, leaving Narset on 1 where she doesn't have an activated ability anymore.
Right.
And passing the turn back here to Juza.
I mean, you kind of figure you'll draw a Chain Whirl at some point, and that will just dispose of the Narset, and you won't have lost a single point of extra damage. Now, you do want to get it down below 2, because being able to find a Deafening Clarion is actually worth a lot, but besides that, not really a big deal. So
Here's Teferi. Now what do you do with Teferi?
it's probably going to bounce Chain Whirl, and
No.
then so Seth ended up getting that extra point of damage from rethinking his attack, and ended up working out perfectly.
Yeah, he found the Chain Whirler you mentioned even sooner than he thought on Martin's turn somehow. But Martin at this point is compelled to do so, as he just needs to stem the bleeding. He's already down to 10, and he was facing 6 power on the battlefield and a Chandra Fire Artisan. So, you know, the noose is tightening very much there, and this is an important juncture here for Juza. It looks like this one may have slipped away from him.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of snowballed very quickly, as the red deck can do. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, dealing damage every single turn. I mean, the Firebrand immediately hitting, the Pyromancer immediately getting more damage, the Chain Whirler plus the attack immediately doing more, and now Chandra is another big problem that, you know, Martin really needs to binding that, and he both doesn't have the binding nor the time to cast it.
Right.
He's just literally facing lethal next turn.
That's right. Chandra Fire Artisan ultimates at 7 loyalty, and part of her ultimate is she does 7 to you. There's other stuff, but she also does 7 to you.
She deals 7 to you, and probably a bit more, assuming you draw a single spell off her.
Exactly. So
Or
with
exile
Martin
single
Juza currently at 8, but likely dropping down to 4 here, it does not feel like there's any way out at this point.
Well, he's going to shock a Pyromancer. He shocked himself to be able to leave shock up, knowing that he wasn't going to have time to cast everything he needed to if he didn't. I mean, the hope was to be able to cast Sarkhan next turn, but honestly, even the way his hand's looking, he's going to have to shock himself for that, and it's just too much damage. There's tough spells already being exiled. Seth still has multiple cards in his hand beyond that. Just this draw from Seth is, I mean, it didn't have Frenzy, but it had everything you could ever need.
Here's that shock. Trades 2 damage to prevent, well, in this case, 1 damage, I suppose. Down to 5 goes Martin Juza, and there's a Gitu Lava Runner to add to the battlefield as well before passing the turn, but this could be it. It's just too much pressure on the board here from Seth Manfield. Looking to try to put some pressure on it on Brad Nelson.
Yeah, well, one of these players will certainly put the pressure on Brad, but Seth would love for it to be him.
That's right.
And there's just none of these lines are good for Martin.
Yeah, there's just no clean outs here at a lowly 5 life. Again, Chandra Fire Artisan applying pressure that even if this board was dealt with would be very difficult. And Martin says, well, my only real play here is just to run out Sarkhan, but this will...
Yeah, the Sarkhan passive will make sure the Pyromancer
leave
can
him
attack.
alive, yeah.
Right. And it stops the War Boss token from attacking.
Right up the stage off of Chandra.
Oh,
well,
it's not over.
Martin does get to survive a turn, but with no outs.
Well, not no outs, just few outs.
Okay.
Ixalan's binding does something.
Oh, okay, sure. So Seth has no attack here then, because the Pyromancer would die. I guess he could get in for 1 if he really wanted, but throw away
Looks
his
like
Chain Whirler.
it looks like a bad turn to be attacking. He probably
Yeah.
needs to just start with light up the stage for the full price. He could also start with Steamkin and then play Light Up the Stage for full price to get a counter on the Steamkin if he wants to.
Seth is a value-oriented individual and would not like to pay full price, but he does reluctantly agree to do so.
That
and
is
he
lethal.
even hit it. Yeah, he did. He got there.
So the
Pyromancer,
Pyromancer,
Pyromancer down to 2. Then he can attack with everything. Oh. This works too. If you take out Sarkon, then the dragon no longer pings anything, and that is 4 damage. And Martin Juza losing to Seth Manfield 2 games to 1.
this was a no wrong way to eat that Reese's.
Yes, it was. It was. If Paul was here, he definitely would have said that.
Oh, yeah. Well, congratulations to Seth Manfield, who is the 3rd player from our MPL Weekly to get a bye onto the top 16 of the Arena
If
Mythic
Brad
Championship.
loses 2-0.
Oh, I spoke too soon. I spoke too soon. Just kidding. Just so excited for that win. That's right. It's very, very, very unlikely that this player who went 6-1 is going to make it.
Well, you now owe him a bye, so
I
work
own
your
the
magic.
Reese's. Yeah. Psych, got you, Seth. Throw your keyboard again.
Yeah, maybe so. At all 3 of us now, right? So, yeah.
Oh,
I'm
my,
sorry.
yes.
It was only us before.
That's
but
right. I'm sorry. It's possible, but this next match is going to determine that, and it seems a slim chance that Nelson wouldn't get through with a single game out of this match because, as you can see, Brad Nelson's record in this Spark split is 6-0. Grzergorz Kowalski with 3-3, and who's brought mono red aggro. Last week was the first time he brought this deck. He was doing a little Demir control, or Demir mid-range.
You can call it control. You can call it mid-range. It's
somewhere in there. There's
no
some
wrong way to
breachers.
eat that Reese's either. It has some controlling elements. It has some mid-range elements. I think the naming convention on those decks is probably pretty weird anyway. So I think you're good with
It's a little
either
squishy
one.
in there.
Yeah, I mean the deck is going to play out pretty controlly. So I like where you're going with it.
And here's the mono red, just more of the standard we've seen. A little changes here and
little
there.
tweaks. This one has
Yeah,
4 Frenzy and 2 Chandra. There's your that's your big storyline.
Ooh, wow.
Does it? There's one on the sideboard.
Oh, maybe it's 3 and 2. Oh,
And
gosh,
here's
I
the
don't know.
Esper mid-range from Brad Nelson.
This deck is actually quite different. This is a deck by Martin Mueller that he used to just completely crush the Mythic Championship qualifier weekend on day 1. I think he just missed the cut on day 2, but
deck
love
is
this take on the
nice.
deck. He cut the Thief of Sanities. He went with Basilica Bellhaunts and Heroes as the only creatures. He's got Elder Spell and Command the Dreadhorde both in the main deck. Just a really awesome deck. Very much not necessarily an Esper mid-range deck, even though it is. It's more of an Esper Super Friends Planeswalker style deck that also has some of the mid-range elements. So a really cool deck. Love its attack on the metagame. And some good sideboard cards, especially for the red deck. We see more copies of Lyra, Ixalan's Binding we just saw. And then
It's very well set up, right? I mean, you
Lots
look
of
at
good
the
options.
bell haunts in the main, and you take out the most fragile option, the Thief of Sanities, right? Those just get shocked. Instead, it's bell haunt for like a 3-for-1 against your opponent.
That's
it's like,
true, but
it's a
you
big
are
swing.
adding those cards, and Basilica Bellhaunt, awesome. Of course, you have to draw it. There's also cards like the Elder Spell and Command the Dreadhorde, which are not so good against the red deck.
Yeah, good
and
point.
so, it's kind of a mix and match. Like Liliana, yeah, if you're alive, she's good. She also costs 6, so, those are the cards that you probably don't want as much against the red matchup that are definitely there for, the more mirrory matchups, the other Planeswalker matchups. But a lot of tools are just absurd.
just give me bell haunts, I'll be fine.
All
And,
right.
and with the
I'll get there.
Kayas. With the Kayas,
Yes,
really good too.
Yes.
Now, this is a win and in for Nelson. Let's see what happens against Nelson and Kowalski.
All right, so this is it. This is what it comes down to here in the Emerald Division. It is Brad Nelson's race to win. He has ran away with this. He's the only player who is undefeated in MPL division play.
These are good hands.
And we've got 2 good hands here to see if he can keep that up. Of course, if he wins, not only will he win his division, but he'll do so in really impressive fashion, not even have to
Just a
drop
little
a
bit.
match. It's like, wow, nobody else was able to do that out of any of the other divisions.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the other divisions just had a lot of really good players in them.
Oh,
So
is that what it was? Lots of really good players. Okay. Grzergorz is looking at you in the upper left like, you talking to me, buddy?
yeah, I mean,
Thought erasure now from Nelson. Sees the Boogeyman, Experimental Frenzy, sitting right in between those 2 cards. Runaway Steamkin can be a problem too, though.
right.
What does Brad actually have to deal with stuff?
Well, he's got a Dovin's Veto. That's an
Okay.
answer to exactly the Frenzy and none of the other cards in hand. And he'd
Still.
certainly love to slow the beats, maybe get a little extra advantage off this Narset, but probably pretty happy to cash it in as a Revitalize, effectively. Like, look at the top 4 cards of your library and gain 3 life. Of course, finding Tyrant, scoring off the deck, that works too.
That works really nicely. He can play his Godless Shrine tapped here and fire off Tyrant Scorn on the Runaway Steamkin. What's the thinking on when you do this, whether to do it right away or to wait?
There's kind of no benefit to doing it right away. The only time you want to make sure you do it is before there's a risk of it getting extra counters, because let's say it could become a 3-3, and maybe they could have a shock to then respond to the Tyrant scored. So if they attack with the 3-3 and they could have a shock theoretically, well, you might be giving them some extra mana to do something else. Of course, Brad also knew most of Grzegorz' hand. He knew that there was no real risk, and it was a 1/1, so not an issue there in the slightest, but those are the times where it comes up.
Basilica Bellhunt right on time. Turn 4 here for Nelson. Puts him up to a cool 21 life.
No attacks.
And no attacks coming in from Kowalski, so that did a good job.
Yeah, Brad is wildly far ahead. He's got answers to all of the big spells in No One's Veto. The big issue here is whether he can find, effectively he wants to draw a blue source this turn so that he can deploy his Narset.
That's tempting, though, right? Get the last card out of hand for your opponent here. Cast another copy of Bellhunt. And how in the world is Kowalski supposed to come back from getting double Bellhunted with a mono red deck? He's now top decking.
Well, it starts with something with 4 as the converted mana cost, and then you go from there.
Hold on, I'm narrowing it down.
There's a couple options. But
here's Narset, Parter of Veils, but interestingly, Brad actually did find an untapped source if he'd like it, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him pay the 2 life here.
That's exactly 20, absolutely.
Yep. Back down to 20, and this gives him rock-solid protection against the top deck Frenzy or Chandra, and now he's just in cruise control. He can play Teferi, Hero of Dominaria next turn, untap the 2 lands, and have up Dovin's Veto for the rest of the game.
Yeah, this is one of those spots where if Kowalski could see Brad's hand after he casted the Teferi and saw Veto, knowing that he couldn't draw Frenzies to get out of it, his head would explode. Now, he doesn't know about either Veto, so this game will continue to play out. And
you kind of mix the two. You know, like if he could see his hand, that makes me think real life.
Right.
Then his head exploding made me think Arena, unless, did you mean for real? Or
if you die in Arena, you die in real life, Marshall.
Wow. And then you immediately come back again to play game 2.
Then you play game 2.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward.
And then you come back next week. And then you play the Mythic Championships on June 21st to June 23rd, brought to you by Marshall and Becca Scott.
Wow. You're picking this up quick. Whoop. Here at Precinct 1. But the truth is that not a whole lot of this actually matters particularly. Oh, I heard you like Narset. There's another one.
Got Narset with your Narset.
Yeah, that's right. So here is Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, plussing, making sure that that other copy of Dovin's Veto stays alive indefinitely. Brad, by the way, you know, he was confident enough to just go ahead and use a Dovin's Veto to protect last turn.
Yeah, I mean, when your opponent has no cards in hand and you're going to play Teferi, which is also an answer to things like Experimental Frenzy, there's not a lot of risk.
Right.
You have another Dovin's Veto. You're going to close out the game pretty soon.
What does a win look like for Brad? Let's just say that Kowalski says, I'm not conceding under any circumstance. What does that actually look like? How does he win the game?
I mean, next turn, assuming he draws all blanks, he's going to get to play Hero into Little Teferi. He can use it to bounce the Steam Can. He can plus the Teferi. He gets to untap 2 lands with Dovin's Veto.
None of these things win you the game, Eric.
Right.
None of them.
I'm getting that.
Not even one of them.
At that point, he's going to have 3 Planeswalkers in play and 4 creatures. He's going to have Dovin's Veto untapped, and his Teferi is going to be threatening to ultimate in a couple turns, and that's how he probably wins this game.
But that doesn't win you the game.
Teferi ultimate, it actually does win you the game because, again, your opponent's head explodes.
Oh.
Once they have no more head, you can't win.
Feel like I covered that option, but fair enough.
Well, here's the Hero into the Little Teferi.
You predicted this, Eric.
I was going to say he's probably going to draw Thought Erasure and then go for his draw step.
You are predicting that part too. Yeah, this has really fallen apart now for Kowalski. This game is definitely in the books in Nelson's favor.
I don't know. I thought when he got Brad down to 22 that things were looking up and up.
And then
it just didn't really snowball out of control from there.
Brad played a shock land. Back down to 20 for you, Bradley.
So this game win locks it up, right? So that what we
actually you're right. That's true because Brad doesn't need to win the match to take the thing down. He needs to just win a game And it looks like that's exactly what he's going to do. Great point, Eric. This is going to be the division emerald going to Brad Nelson if he can somehow.
Do you think he's satisfied?
Some way.
Do you think he's just going to walk out after this one?
No, I don't. I think he will try to win. I think he wants the 7-0 real bad. I really do. I mean, he has been putting, he's been talking about it on his stream and tweeting about it and stuff. And you mentioned it earlier too, but the MPL players are taking these matches extremely seriously and somewhat personally in a way. Like, they really carry the weight of it, and Brad is no different.
Yeah, I mean, mythic points are mythic points.
That's
at
right.
the end of the day. They're not mythic points.
Good point, Eric.
Mythic point.
All right, good mythic level point there you just made. Narset Parter avails to replace the somewhat exhausted other Narset.
Yeah, no, I mean, this game's getting a little bit closer. I mean, this Fanatical Firebrand could be sacked at any time to bring Brad to 19. And from there...
Oh, okay.
and from there, the sky's the limit. I guess not with the Basilica Bell Haunt.
Yeah, the Bell Hunt
It's
really
unlucky.
throwing... Even though it's not even going to get a card this time.
It's going to get a couple cards worth of value, though.
That is true. Only the two.
Somehow these 1/1s are trading with almost every creature on the board as well.
Yeah.
Now he's just happy to see Bell Haunts die. He even has to command the Dreadhorde to bring them back for value, to gain more life if should he need to later. But I think Brad's just going to play
He's not even
super
gonna
safe.
attack.
Just let Teferi ultimate.
Yeah.
That'll be enough.
It is funny. Because this is, of course, the point where you think, how much more can Kowalski take?
I couldn't take it
Right,
anymore
you would have
several
been
turns
done,
ago.
right? I would have been too.
Do you think Kowalski knows how far that advantage bar is in Nelson's favor right now?
Yes, I do. I think Kowalski knows very, very well how disadvantaged he is at this point. I think the kind of the main thing is the fact that he could still draw experimental frenzy. And we've just seen, you joked earlier and said the sky's the limit, but that actually has been the case with that particular card. As we know, that's not actually an out because of Dovin's veto at this point, but Kowalski doesn't know that.
Exactly.
Now there's another answer for it if he can get Baby Teferi. But in the meantime, this is all academic, and this is Brad Nelson kind of going through the.
He also just has the option to cast Command the Dreadhorde for very little. He can just get back the 3-mana Teferi and maybe nothing else if he wants to. So it's kind of a 6-mana 3-life option to make Teferi and maybe something else if he wants to, which I think is something he's considering right now.
Brad's going to go for.
Get the Firebrand. Why not? Wow. Brad at his lowest life total of the game now.
Yeah. Plummeting from 23. Now he's going to be at.
He's at an
18?
effective 14 with those
Or
Firebrands.
16, I mean. Oh, that's interesting. The Planeswalkers talk over each other if they both enter the battlefield at the same time. I did not
Not
know
super polite of those Planeswalkers.
that. No, not at all. It's almost like they were programmed that way. So this does leave Thought Erasure, of course, as an instant speed option now, thanks to Time Raveler. And that is just another way that Kowalski could say, well, I know about the Thought Erasure. I know he can cast it and probably will on my draw step. So now I need 2 experimental frenzies. Maybe I should not wait for that to happen.
He probably didn't have any plans, so
No, it's true.
might as well play it
Also, playing Magic is fun, as it turns out.
out. Do we know how good Brad's internet connection is?
Is that where we're at here from Kowalski's side?
For this game, maybe he still's got 2 more games, right?
That is true.
Now, it may not help for Seth to be able to win the division with Brad getting this game win, but Kowalski still has those 2 mythic points on the line and can finish with a winning record. It's worth a lot.
Of course. And he is finally going to scoop it up here, though, as he sees the Thought Erasure go in his draw step. And that was a convincing victory for Brad Nelson. And, he still has to finish off the match, but we should offer him congratulations
Absolutely.
on his Emerald Division victory. He is now unassailable in that division.
In the Week 1 weekly MPL show, one of our casters pointed out that Brad Nelson is the best standard player in the world and sounds very smart. And, of course, that's Brian Kibler and no one else. Definitely not.
That's
Cedric.
not true. I watched that, and Cedric said it too.
Well, he was probably just piggybacking on a great thought Brian had.
Oh, I see. That's how that works. Yeah, and Brad kind of is, by the way.
He certainly was this split.
Cedric, I mean,
He was the
Cedric
best
was
standard player in the
proven
split, I'll tell you
very,
that much.
very correct by that statement here.
Yeah, there's not a lot of evidence to prove him wrong yet.
No, we'll just keep waiting.
We still have a Mythic Championship, though.
Maybe he'll lose at some point, but not today. Now, he does still have to finish off this match by winning one of the next 2 games to Brad if he wants to pick up those 2 Mythic points. And also, I have to say, it has to matter to him to go undefeated against the MPL field.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, just as a pride point or whatever. It doesn't, it doesn't change anything otherwise. But again, the 2 Mythic points are very real.
Well, it's
Kowalski's
definitely going to be
the
harder
last
when you're on
stand.
the draw.
That's right. Yep. This red deck, of course, very punishing when on the play. And let's see what happens now. Wow. It's a decent draw, though. He's got
quite
Tyrant
good.
Scorn to kill something early. He's got Thought Erasure to break up any nonsense. And even has an answer for one of the 4-drops with D-Spark.
Yeah, he doesn't have a great opportunity right now to cast Thought Erasure on curve, but at some point he should get some good value.
Get that, Val?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a great start for Kowalski to combat this. I think that if Brad was omniscient, he would for sure cast the Thought Erasure here to maybe get rid of this Legion War Boss. And
So you're
you
saying
don't
that
become
Brad
the
is omniscient?
you don't become the best standard player in the world by not being omniscient.
So what you're saying here, right, is that the standard play would be to use Tyrant Scorn to just kill.
I don't know if that's a standard play. I think that, a less experienced player would snap that off. You're always told, don't you bolt the bird. Don't let the Steam can get out of hand. And in this case, honestly, it's not going to get too far out of hand with just 3 mana, and you have this nice firm answer. And honestly, Teferi Time Raveler is a pretty good answer to even the Steam can becoming a 3/3. So a very good play by Brad. It's tough to say what a conventional play would be, because I think that the best players in the world are going to come up with that line, and I think that obviously Brad is in that group. But it's not a slam dunk, it's not a for sure, and I think that most players would not make that play, and so it's certainly interesting and worth noting.
And of course, this is how the best players do get ahead in our game. It's sometimes you'll see a line of play that other players don't, but oftentimes it's these subtle interactions, I'm just going to go a little bit of a different direction here than the obvious line, and they pick up percentage points over and over and over until they overwhelm the opponent. He's going to leave Tyrant Scorn at the ready here for that runaway Steamkin after Tibalt Rakish Instigator hit the battlefield.
But just imagine the board, should he have taken the other line? If he Tyrant Scorns and kills that Steamkin right away, this Legion War Boss is a huge problem.
Yes.
Now, he probably wouldn't have done that. He probably would have at least waited till combat so the Legion War Boss couldn't get out of hand, and so then it's not nearly as big a problem. But, this is just a play that a lot of people are going to fire off and not risk it. And this is why, you want to take note of what the best players are doing. You got to make sure that you time it correctly, and in this case, he found the opportunity to use the Thought Erasure rather than using the removal spell, and getting paid off for it.
Interesting choices here. Once again, Thought Erasure is the plan for Brad Nelson. Looks like he's picking the Chain Whirler, perhaps, or he can also pick Light Up the Stage. He did find Ixalan's Binding, though. Ooh, hello, Lyra Dawnbringer.
Doesn't have the 5th land yet.
No, but it's so important in the matchup.
Yep.
And this allows him to de-spark away Chandra and still keep Ixalan's Binding for any other of his, problematic permanents coming down the line here.
Yeah, this is a turn where Brad really wanted Grzergorz to draw a land, and he did. Drew a blank. So this is going to give him some time to be able to set up either casting Ixalan's Binding or Teferi to dig a little bit deeper.
Yep, Teferi Time Raveler, of course, a nice way to sort of set your opponent off balance by a little bit and get you a card in the process. He's going to go for Ixalan's Binding now, though, to take out the Chain Whirler. And this, still has a big effect on the board. It leaves Kowalski with just 2 power, though. Woo, look at that. Chandra Fire Artisan off the top of the library is a nice one. Especially after your opponent just used Ixalan's Binding.
Yeah, I think that's the only one in Brad's deck, too.
Watery Grave, though, and this is the big stand here. Lyra Dawnbringer. Now, one thing we have to keep in mind is that there is a Tibalt on the battlefield. So she will not be able to gain life as long as he's sitting there. But she can simply attack him and then start gaining life. The question is, does that window open too wide? Because he's down to 6 here.
Attacking Tibalt for a turn without adding anything else to the board is not going to work out well.
No bueno. So, pair of Teferis in hand here for Brad Nelson, a Chain Whirler, in hand now for Kowalski. Sorry, exiled.
All right, he couldn't cast the Chain Whirler. This time I know because
Yes.
Vixalan's binding.
That is correct. It just stays and disappears into exile off of Chandra. So what does he do now? He can start time raveling away these devils.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. But I mean, you got to answer the Chandra. You don't have a lot of time. Like in some ways, he needs to time raffle his binding to be able to deal with the Chandra, but doesn't have the time to do that immediately.
Finds a land off the top of the library. He could play Isolated Chapel and then play Time Raveler number 2 to get another card deeper. But yeah, the clock is very real here. And the answers for Chandra that you want to find are the type that take her off the battlefield without actually doing damage to her.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to have to attack Tybalt and then hopes the top 2 cards don't have a way to deal 3 damage. Then he can start gaining life next turn and potentially even go for the other Teferi and bounce the Ixalan's Binding to remove a Chandra on 7.
Hey, that could work, right? He doesn't care about the Goblin Chain Whirler if Lyra Dawnbringer starts to connect.
See, it's a yes and no situation here, because let's say that Grzergorz draws all blanks here. He draws a blank off the Chandra and a blank for his turn, which he already didn't. But let's say that was a mountain. He would attack Brad potentially down to 3 if he doesn't care about Teferi. So if Brad goes back up to 8 with a Lyra and plays Teferi, bounces Binding, and then Bindings the Chandra, the Chain Whirler comes back, sending Brad to 7, and there's 6 damage in play. So we're looking at 1 point of damage between 3 cards to effectively win the game there.
I see. Okay.
And even from there, should Lyra attack again, Brad would only go to 6, and there's still 6 points in play. So,
wow. Usually it's really tough to.
Right.
Usually Lyra does a great job of distancing your life total from anything like that. But wow, when you break it down like that, it doesn't sound so great actually in this spot.
yeah, just not enough.
Now
So,
Brad has not won the game though, right? It's just the Pyromancer that he has here, so he'll be at 1.
Yeah, Grzergorz has not won the game yet. Yeah,
Excuse me,
yeah.
Grzergorz, thank you.
And he does have to answer the Chandra this turn. And he can't.
And he can't
yeah,
attack it.
He can attack with Chandra, I guess, but he's certainly going to die on the battlefield.
Well, there's a Teferi Time Raveler.
Right. So the Lyra has to attack to be able to bounce the Binding, because the Chain Whirler would be lethal.
Exactly. So
and then
goes to
that's
6,
lethal.
and then
So
it's lethal.
there's no out from that.
That's right. And of course, just to break it down, if he attacks Chandra Fire Artisan, he loses.
So he needs to no. He can't find anything else. There's no other answer for Chandra, right? He doesn't have any Vraska's Contempts. There's no more Bindings. I don't think the Elder Spells are in his deck. I guess he has 1 more copy of D-Spark.
Okay. He's used 1 this game, but it's not that much.
So I guess that's what we're looking for. He's going to be mana short from being able to cast 5 mana Teferi. That would have otherwise been a pretty
sure.
reasonable answer.
He found a 5-mana Teferi, but it is not enough because he can't cast him. And we're going to get a game number 3. Kowalski says, I'm the last line of defense. You're not going to 7-0 on me, although he will not be on the play this time.
Yeah, that game would have been real different with Brad on the play. It's a huge game changer. It just changes, who gets out in front. And playing from behind, it's a lot harder than playing from ahead. And when you can start bouncing the Ixalan's Bindings and making sure that you can deal with these Planeswalkers, it's a lot easier to win. And it didn't take very many more life points to really have that Lyra stabilize the game, but he just didn't have them.
Yeah, it's rare when you see Lyra Dawnbringer hit the battlefield and not win the game for the player who cast it, especially against Red, but that was the case here. And I think we have to give a lot of credit to Tybalt as well, right? Soaking up that 1 attack and negating the life gain from it was a big deal.
Yeah, huge.
Okay, a bunch of cheap cards here for Brad Nelson, all 2s and 3s in his opening hand, and it looks like a mulligan to 6 now for Kowalski. This is all good news for Brad in his bid to lock up a 7-0. He's already got the Emerald Division locked up, and he's secured that bye for the Mythic Invitational 3 coming up in just a few weeks. Now he wants to get the extra 2 Mythic points, and he wants that 7-0.
This is a great start. No answer to hero in hand.
Wow, and a bad draw there for Kowalski. A second
2 pair.
Experimental Frenzy. Not going to do it, and he has no play here. And look at this for Brad Nelson. He has his choice of options. Wow, Oath of Kaya in hand as well. Fantastic. Teferi Time Raveler is the choice for him. But this one could get away. I mean, if Kowalski doesn't find some answers very, very quickly, this one's just going to straight up be over. Legion Warboss versus Hero of Precinct 1. Hero seems to be the better play here at this point. There it is, Legion
Interesting
Warboss.
choice from Brad there, choosing not to deck with the Hero, expecting Legion Warboss to come down, wanting to eat the token.
Super smart. Again, Brad just on top of every little detail.
And this looks like, oh, I would
Wow,
assume it would be a Tyrant scored into Upkeep Thought Erasure, but Oath of Kaya is also a great line.
It's a nice target for an Oath of Kaya. Killed a Legion Warboss. Also, of course, you do get that extra token. Will he attack this time? Nope. He's just going to sit back once again. And again, check out the big brain on Brad. He just has it all sorted out.
I don't know why
here.
he wouldn't attack with the 1/1.
Oh, the 1/1. You wanted to send that one in.
At the very least. I mean, Goblin Chain Whirler is going to eat them anyway. Legion Warboss you already have handled. Legion Warboss plus Shock, maybe, but like, that's also not that big a deal. I'm surprised by not attacking with at least the 1/1.
Lightning Strike was the draw step there for Kowalski, giving him at least an answer for the Hero of Precinct 1. Finally, if that's what he wants to do. The damage feels like it's been done, but
Yeah, this battlefield isn't like this turn. If he casts Lightning Strike, means his entire turn is Lightning Strike.
yes.
And there's still a Planeswalker in the battlefield. There's still multiple tokens on the battlefield. This Teferi is just going to say, okay, I get to draw a card for a -3, and you lost 4 mana.
Time Walk, you and I draw a card, not the worst.
Yeah.
And he even has Thought Erasure in his hand to simply take away an Experimental Frenzy if he'd like, though with 2 copies of it, he may be tempted to leave.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see what he does.
Taking the 1 answer to Hero makes a lot of sense here. He's got the answer for the War Boss already in hand.
Wow.
Although that's going to make him
too.
maybe wish that he had taken the Experimental Frenzy. Although I think Brad at this point knows that this game is in great shape. I assume he'll start attacking. I mean, of course he knows about the War Boss, so leaving back the 2/2, cool, if that's what you want to do. Nope, not this time. This time he's perfectly happy. If Grzegorz' turn is to cast a War Boss, Brad's happy.
Right. Brad loves that situation.
And also he's just going to cast Tyrant Scorn before we get to combat. So, extra reason to be happy.
Brad Nelson surgically moving his way through game number 3 and looks to be in good position to make really a historic run here, the first player to get to 7-0 their division in the MPL. And that's something that we might not see that often. It actually is extremely difficult to get to that point.
I mean, there weren't even very many players at 3-0. Like, it's tough. It's tough in a round robin to defeat everyone. But, someone did it.
I'm hungry. Fanatical Firebrand.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's a Firebrand.
That's a Firebrand.
It's not a Firebrand.
This was off of Light Up the Stage from Kowalski to Spark off the top of the library as well. Just gives good old FF Freak backup plans for his backup plans, and things looking beautiful here for Brad Nelson.
Yep.
Sanding in the squadron.
Well, he's going to take it all.
Yeah, that's 5 damage. So down to 11 goes Kowalski. And here's a Basilica Bellhunt, which just looks like a good body at this point. I mean, he's adding a 3/4.
Yeah, there's no answer for the 3/4.
Right. It's just like, this is a good attacker. Right now, Kowalski has drawn such a clunky hand that looks like it's going to be very difficult for him to really even mount much of a comeback at all. You normally, when you have Experimental Frenzy, you think, okay, well, I've got a chance, but he's so far behind on board, and this is a good chance to highlight Hero of Precinct 1 and its massive effect this match. And today, actually, I should say, it's really had a couple of games where it was a 2-mana play that ran away with the game, and that, of course, is why you have it in your deck. It's easy to answer, but they have to.
Absolutely right.
Here's Chandra Fire Artisan. A desperation play now for Grzergorz Kowalski. He's going to plus that, but I think that at this point, Brad is very much focused on Kowalski's life total. to the point that he's just going to go ahead and Tyrant scoring away this Firebrand. It'll probably trade off for a token, but
yeah, what this does is it
cancel
just
that.
leaves Brad the Teferi bounce my Uthakaya play for lethal.
there you go. And that is going to be game. Brad Nelson wins the Emerald Division and 7-0.
That's pretty good.
Thank you, Brad.
That's right. This time
I
it
heard Brad say good
actually
game.
qualifies to go on to day 2 of the Mythic Championship. That's coming up. Very, very exciting stuff from Brad Nelson.
Super impressive. It's hard to imagine. Again, it's not like a regular tournament where there is going to be an undefeated player up until some point. That is not guaranteed by any stretch.
Look at
And
that.
Brad running the full 7-0, especially against this field, is just incredible.
So beautiful. I mean, with Seth Manfield 6-1, that's why I got so excited for Seth. Oh, wait, nope,
No.
doesn't matter because
In any
Brad
other
is
division.
undefeated.
Yeah. By the way, Matt Nass, we got one.
Scoreboard.
Oh, yeah, look at him.
Attaboy, buddy.
Touchdown Hawk. Oh, and this is a beautiful quote from Brad Nelson. It says, "It's funny you thought anybody had a chance of tarnishing my perfect record. Blah, ha, ha." No. It says, "I'm always motivated when I register a deck and play matches. It's probably an extremely unhealthy mindset, but I've always hated losing more than I've liked winning. I always care. I always try. Once I was 4-0, though I started to think it was a serious possibility that I could win the whole thing, the pressure was on, and I did everything in my power to get the most wins I possibly could." That's a quote from
Wow.
Brad Nelson.
Good
How did
for
that
him.
work out for him?
Yeah.
Pretty well, yeah.
I feel like
He got the most wins anyone possibly could.
Well,
Yeah.
he should have given that advice to the other players. Just want to win. Just want to win.
maximum wins
Yeah.
for Brad Nelson.
Good strategy. Worked
Yep.
out well. Very, very impressive. Now, once again, I want to remind everybody at home that you should tune in for our Arena Mythic Championship number 3 coming up in 2 weekends from now. That's June 21st to 23rd. We're going to have some great coverage coming at you. So just come back to wherever you are right now. It'll probably be here at that time. And we do have a summary video for you for this division, the Emerald Division. And then after that, we're going to go on to our final division of the day. But right now, we're going to hear from Corbin.
It was always going to be a historic first split for the Magic Pro League. The creation of the league and the launch of Arena meant that this first season would be etched into Magic history no matter what happened in the Spark Split. Brad Nelson made some history anyways. The King of Standard continues to rule. With a win over Grzergorz Kowalski this week, Nelson became the first and only player to finish a split undefeated. And it makes sense, at least as much as anyone performing well enough to win 7 straight matches at this level of competition makes sense, that Nelson would be the one to pull it off. After all, he's been making history for quite a while. He's been looked to as one of, if not the best, standard players in the world. And Nelson showed us exactly why this split. He may have finished undefeated, but things didn't start out quite so perfectly. In fact, in his first ever MPL match, Nelson missed his second land drop against Matt Nass. Of course, that worked out just fine for him and his Azorius aggro deck. He proceeded to play out 4 1-drops. He went on to win that game and the match, overcoming some adversity right out of the gate, but still putting a win on the board. Keeping it fairly simple with his deck choice of White Weenie in Week 1, Nelson went the opposite direction for a pair of matches in Week 2. He brought Bant Nexus with Kefnet God Eternal to the table. Now, he started by rolling to 2 quick wins over Christian Hauck's mono red deck, and then he turned in the match of the week against Hall of Famer Shadow Yasuoka and his Bant mid-range deck. The match went all 3 games, with the first 2 being split thanks to some very nice plays from both sides. That sent things into a Game 3 where one of the most bizarre back and forths with deputy detentions you will ever see went down. That, along with some tricky interactions between Blast Zone and Wilderness Reclamation, allowed Nelson to pull off the exciting victory and move to 3-0. Suddenly, he had the division title in his sights. But first, he had a matchup against undefeated Martin Juza in Week 3. Nelson again showed his ability to play all decks in the format comfortably, switching seamlessly to Celestia aggro and running all over Martin Juza's mono red deck with it. Nelson's reward for that? Another matchup of perfect records in Week 4, this time against the buzzsaw known as Seth Manfield, who had blazed his own undefeated trail to that point. Again, Nelson switched decks, but this time he might be the underdog. Esper decks typically don't want to see mono red on the other side of the table. But this time, the Player of the Year came prepared, with Oath Akaya and Basilica Belhant both gaining him a ton of life over the course of the match. Nelson's tweaks to the Esper Hero deck proved to be exactly what he needed in the matchup, and by taking down his friend, he took control of his division. But he still had a long way to go, and it started with another match against Red, this time from Alexander Hayne. And their match provided the best top deck of Nelson's MPL career to this point. He had a crucial Dovin's Veto for Hayne's Experimental Frenzy, and then found the perfect card on the top of his deck in Cry of the Carnarium, clearing Hayne's board to win the game. But Nelson couldn't rest quite yet. Both Seth Manfield and Martin Juza had done everything they could since losing to Nelson, and both entered the final week on a collision course with each other, with the potential for the winner to steal the division if Nelson faltered against Grzergorz Kowalski. So it all came down to whether or not Nelson could take down Kowalski's mono red deck in week 5. Game 1 was a treat to watch, as you saw as Nelson ran laps around the red deck with a trio Basilica Belhants to go along with 3 different Planeswalkers. Kowalski fought back by burning Nelson out in the second game. Meanwhile, Seth Manfield won the pivotal matchup against Juza, meaning he would be the one with a shot to overtake Nelson if Nelson were to lose the final game against Kowalski. But there was never a doubt. Nelson untapped with Hero of Precinct 1, and then Teferi of Oath and Kaya snowballed it from there. Brought the game to a quick end as Nelson put off the perfect split and earned the Emerald Division title. That's a wrap on the Emerald Division for the Spark Split. I'll see you all at the Arena Mythic Championship in a few weeks. Until then, I'm Corbin Hostler. Thanks for watching.